This is one of many attempts, but it is, as you can probably see, as you probably read, that it is a Star Wars canon book review. And I'll be reviewing, as you can tell this is probably going to be a long video, all the Star Wars books in the canon. Let's start with this one, called Dark Disciple, done by Christy Golden. It is based off of unproduced episodes of The Clone Wars, which I'm a huge fan of. However, it does lack, based on its rather short length, it does lack a overall feel. Like, a lot of the plot rushes very fast. But it is a story about Quinlan Voss from Star Wars Republic comic going undercover to basically persuade Asajj Ventress to assassinate Count Dooku. And originally it was supposed to be 8 episodes, and the Clone Wars split into 2 arcs, but it was cancelled, unfortunately. But I would give this book a really good read, because it is definitely one of my favorites. It is a book that really details in the idea of forgiveness, and I think a lot of Clone Wars fans would definitely enjoy it. Now, moving on, I'll be going to some of the... already going into the Imperial era of Star Wars. Most of these books do deal in the Age of the Empire. I think that's kind of a bad thing for the new canon. I think they should start spreading. I mean, there's so much Star Wars to cover, and yet we keep reading about Imperial stormtroopers under Emperor Palpatine. But it's still a good era. It's just, I would much rather see a bunch of prequel books. I mean, it is a wide encompassing time period, but especially some new sequel books. But I guess we'll have to wait on that. The first of the new books is A New Dawn by John Jackson Miller. It is a prequel to Star Wars Rebels Season 1. It definitely deals with their start in their relationship, as well as the beginning of, basically, Heir is on her own as a rebel cell, presumably under Fulcrum Initiative, and she eventually recruits this sort of lost Jedi Knight. Definitely is a good book. It introduces a Star Wars canon character found not in the movies, but in some of the books, definitely the Aftermath books, called Sloane, Rey Sloane. And yeah, I would definitely kind of wait. Some of the first canon books weren't all that great. It could just be the amount of time since I read them, but I do believe you should give this one a pass for things like Dark Disciple and some of the other books. I'll definitely encourage reading if it's very good. This book, I really enjoy this book. It is very short, unlike another James Luceno favorite, Darth Plagueis. It is about basically Tarkin on a mission that would eventually promote him to Grand Moff. Of course, he has to deal with Vader. It's sort of their relationship getting along, and it really gets into Tarkin's head a lot of times. Not as much as the Thrawn book, but it gives a ruthless side to Tarkin that I really like. Of course, that's who Tarkin is. And I would definitely say this book is a must for Imperial fans, though I would hold on it if you're not an Empire lover. Now, this book has been ridiculed a lot. It was originally supposed to be part of the now Legends Republic and Empire trilogy, the other two being Han Solo with a book called Honor Among Thieves, I believe, and a Leia book. No, I have no clue what that. I think it's Razor's Edge is that book. I haven't read those books. I do plan on reading definitely the Han Solo book when the Han Solo trilogy, the Han Solo movie comes out. And based on what I'm getting, even though this is the one book that slipped into canon, it should never have gotten there. I didn't mind it too much, but it definitely was a waste of time, and you wouldn't think reading about Luke Skywalker would be a waste. It can get very corny at times. I would definitely, if you're going to start reading canon books, you would save this one for last. Now, this book is a very, very intense book. A book called Lords of the Sith. We'll give that, by Paul S. Kemp. It is pretty good length. Sorry. It's about Emperor Palpatine and Vader basically working together on the first time in the canon. And it details they get lost on Ryloth, the planet of the Twi'leks. And they must be working together against a rebel cell leader for the Free Ryloth movement called Cham Syndulla. He is a character from the Clone Wars series and Rebels. Hera Syndulla's father. Most of the book did focus on him, which is a shame. Should focus on Vader, even though he was a great focus on the book. And of course, you probably know how it ends. But if you definitely want to see the Sith Lords in action, and at the same time, definitely the start of the book was one of my favorite parts of it. It reminded me a lot of Vader from the end scene of Rogue One. But yeah, if you're definitely a Lord of the Sith fan, you would read Lords of the Sith. Now moving on to these books. These are a junior novelization trilogy done by different authors. You can definitely feel it is definitely marketed to children. However, I still enjoy it because it does give new insight into the canon. And the overbranching story, it includes pictures like this one done by Ralph McQuarrie. I can't find the last one, but it is definitely illustrated, which I think was always a good idea to have it as Ralph McQuarrie. New generation of fans will if they haven't seen these movies, will wonder what the movie would look like, and I really do think McQuarrie is a good choice for introducing kids visually to Star Wars. This book definitely says that Chewbacca has a family, which from the holiday special, as you can, their names are still intact, but I don't mind too much. I think maybe we did see pictures of Chewbacca's, another Wookiee with Chewbacca, in images for the Han Solo movie. Now, even though most people will say this is their least favorite of the junior novelizations, it's actually my favorite. It really gets into, for children, it gets into more, Ralph McQuarrie definitely gets into the how to be a Jedi aspect of the story. Like, they would have little lessons here that tell you basically sort of like yoga moves and things like that. Very, very like how to meditate, how to see things that aren't really there, kind of thing. A lot of things that children, I'm sure, would definitely enjoy, and who knows, maybe even believe the Jedi are real. But it even has a fable, Yoda says, that really details Luke's story, not in the movie, not in any other sort of novelization of Star Wars, but I definitely enjoy it. But the most all-encompassing of the novelizations, whereas this one, Return of the Jedi, it is a longer book, but not too bad, actually, for children at least. And it does detail other things. Now, this doesn't look like Ralph McQuarrie, but it could be. It details in the other parts of the canon, like Ezra's message to in season 1 of Rebels, or Ahsoka even mentions Ahsoka really quickly. But other than that, those are just novels. Now I'm getting into the Rogue One sort of books. I definitely loved the movie. And these books, this Catalyst was my least favorite. It did introduce Galen and Krennic, and even a tiny bit of Saw Gerrera. However, it did seem really boring. James Luceno has been known to make, for lack of a better term, boring books, but I did enjoy all the insight it had on the Death Star's history, how Geonosians built it, how Galen finds out about its true purpose when he develops kyber crystal technology, and basically has to get away to Lamu. Definitely a prequel to Rogue One. And here's the Rogue One novelization. I'll be getting into the Force Awakens novelization as well, but for Rogue One, I would say the biggest difference with that and the Force Awakens novelization, it's better. It has a telling of how it really gets into the characters' heads, is what I'm saying. It definitely talks a lot about each of the ensemble cast members that you might not really care about as much as Jyn and Cassian, but it really gets into their heads as well. I haven't finished it yet, but I'll definitely be getting to it. Unfortunately, the audiobook isn't my favorite for this, done by Jonathan Davis. I'm sure he's a nice man, but just not my favorite guy to voice the books compared to Mark Thompson and very recently Janita Gavankar for this book. This is Inferno Squad, and boy, this is my favorite of the new Canon's books. Yes, sorry, Thrawn. It is by Christie Golden again, and it deals in the ambiguity of morality in war. It talks about the remnants of Saw Gerrera's partisans, though it doesn't have Two Tubes or Moroff or that little guy played by Warwick Davis, but it deals with a Clone Wars character who is called the Mentor. And though he's not the leader, he's definitely the guy calling most of the shots. Unless he's voted down by the true leader, Staven, who was in Rebel Rising, a Jyn Erso book. It's definitely one of the most intense. It also details the beginning of the video game Inferno Squad with Battlefront 2, and it does detail in the squad of characters, the 3 characters people will see in the video game, and a 4th one, and I won't tell you what happens to her, but they'll tell you what happens to Sin Marana, that character. I definitely would recommend this book. It was a fun read, I couldn't put it down. Janita Gavankar does a really good job voicing the characters, or at least her character, if not. And I enjoy a story with spies, double agents, very good, and having to, those spies, let terrible things happen to the thing they're trying to protect, the government they're trying to protect. And that goes well with the story of Iden Versio. Definitely a character I do feel for. I said in a review that a lot of these characters you just love to hate, but there's also characters that you hate to love. So, yeah, very, very good, well done book. My favorite. Then we get into the first of the Battlefront books, tie into the first Battlefront game called Twilight Company. It details basically, if the Inferno Squad was the elite, very let's get some rebel scum sort of story, these books definitely give another side to the rebellion, telling their story. And it details a man called Hazrim Namir, who is the biggest image in the Battle of Hoth right here, as well as characters like Gadrin, a basilisk I really enjoyed, and where my thumb is pointing to, I'm guessing that's Roach, who is one of my favorite characters, doesn't talk very much, but I just enjoyed her sort of very quiet persona. There's Brand, I would imagine, like a character who keeps changing her stories like every time someone asks her about it, I believe. And it is an era of Empire Strikes Back, where it starts right before the movie, goes into little flashbacks in the sort of Rebels era of Hazrim, and kind of why he doesn't really... He seems like a character who's very beaten down, very worn out from the war, and I enjoy it. It gives a very realistic taste to the Rebels. Done by Alexander Freed. I definitely enjoyed this book, but it's not a huge book, and it's not a must-read, is what I'm saying. It's a long book, but whatever. And then we get to some of the young adult books. Start with Ahsoka. Actually, met the actress a few times. Ashley Eckstein, who voices both Ahsoka in the TV show and in this audiobook. Though you can really tell this is her first time. It is basically her story right after Clone Wars, and how she finds her white lightsaber. She still got her outfit that would have been used in season 6 or 7 of the Clone Wars and onward. It is definitely a great book for Ahsoka fans, and I know there's a lot of them out there, even grown men like me. Definitely a story I listened to a few times, or once in audio form and another in on my own pace reading. I would definitely recommend this book, especially for the animated TV show fans, like the Clone Wars and Rebels. Now this is a very sad book. I mean, a prequel to Jyn Erso's life. You would think it would be sad, but it gets to dark places too sometimes as well, and it might be a young adult book, but it is one of the more darker of the books. It's funny how all the Rogue One tie-ins, or anything that has to do with Saw Gerrera, is very ultimately dark. I guess that's what happens when you deal with the man. And it's a story about her time on Wobani, but that's not the main focus. It focuses on her with Saw Gerrera, how she grew up, even finding a love at one point. Though I won't tell you what happens to Hatter. Definitely a pickup if you want to read more Rogue One stories like I did. And it really gets you the feels for Jyn Erso. Now the last of these are Lost Stars. It is basically a Romeo and Juliet, very long book as you can tell, a Romeo and Juliet story on rebels in Empire. Originally, they were both from the Empire, Thane Kyrell and Sienna Ree, but it details a time before the Galactic Civil War, and it goes into their perspective in the movies. And they still love each other, even though after everything that happens in those movies and all the characters they have to deal with, everything they see on the seas and what Thane Kyrell has to believe in, and it ends in the Battle of Jakku, so it really does go from start to finish about the Rebel story in the eyes of two mishap, like, well, I forgot the line in Romeo and Juliet. So if you know it, name in the comic section below. Definitely a book I would recommend, but I would hold off on it if... Oops, sorry about that. That's the phone going off. I'll fix that. Alright, and now we get into one more Rogue One book. It is kind of like the backstory adventure of Chirrut and Baze. Definitely like to see more of them in the movie. So anyone who says that they're just there to encourage more Chinese audiences that really never came for Rogue One, I say that's totally not true. These characters are very indelible, or very, very lovable characters, and it's definitely, if you're... One problem I have with these two characters is it does kind of encourage the sort of, sort of the religion aspect of the Force, religious aspect of the Force, spiritual. Baze, of course, is not spiritual, while Chirrut is definitely one with the Force. And it has a picture in here I want to show, but mainly what's best about this book is that it made the... It made the Sith code and Jedi code canon. I mean, you got some inferences in it on Twilight of the Apprentice for the Sith code, but we never really got a confirmation that these codes are canon. Now they are, and I'm really happy about that because they're really good sort of mantras. It details them saving children, how Baze got his big gun, that sort of thing. Now these are Journey to the Force Awakens books. They detail individual adventures of the main free cast, Han, Luke, and Leia. Like, this book was a really good telling of Luke Skywalker on his own for the first time. Kind of like Jedi, like, what was it called? Man, that book is so forgettable, even I forgot it. Heir to the Jedi. This book I would... Out of the three, I would definitely recommend Princess Leia the most, but I did enjoy Luke learning about training in the Temple of Edith on Deveron. Kind of definitely goes into character for all of these, but otherwise, the beginning and end of each of these books detail, besides Luke, of course, details inferences into The Force Awakens, and here's the cover, hardcover at least, and it definitely tells the tale of Leia, which, for this book, Moving Target, Leia, a Princess Leia adventure. It definitely details on how she had to deal and keep moving on with Han Solo and Carbonite. Curious of how she'll deal with Han Solo in The in The Last Jedi, hint, if anyone's seen the movie The Force Awakens. And Han Solo adventure, definitely a fun story, but where he's working with the Rebel Alliance, but it's my least favorite of the three. I do like Han Solo a lot, but definitely recommend Princess Leia the most to start out in. And before I get into the sequel era, let's go with Thrawn. As you can tell, there's no writing on the front or even the back of the book. It was an exclusive from Star Wars Celebration. It's a very thick book, more than 400 pages long, even for a book of that size. And it goes, they're making a comic adaptation of this book. I don't know how, but they are. And it details Thrawn's early life as this Sherlock Holmes kind of character. Very sort of like evil Sherlock Holmes, as I like to call him, though I'm sure people will dispute that. Also, his Watson is a character not Gilad Palian from the Thrawn trilogy, but rather a new character, an ensign called Eli Vanto. And they do have their method of deduction when they search for a character's trail, a rebel sort of informant called Night Swan, who definitely had an interesting philosophy, a Moriarty, or whatever his character is from Sherlock Holmes. But I do enjoy this book. It's not my favorite, but unlike Inferno Squad, but I do enjoy the sort of smart writing, and Timothy Zahn, especially doing Thrawn, is very, very smart writing indeed. Each chapter begins with a sort of goes into Thrawn's philosophy in his head, how he sees things, a very Art of War style telling of his mindset and how war should be fought. That's my dogs. Here we have the Aftermath Trilogy. It's been ridiculed a lot. I mean, I don't mind it so much, but yeah, I understand all the criticism. I haven't read Empire's End yet. I'll be getting to that at some point, but you know, it's been slow trying to get through these books. My favorite so far is Aftermath Life Debt, though I heard the third book is the best of the three. Each story has these interludes that tell you how the galaxy is running after or near the end of the Galactic Civil War. The first book, an Imperial meeting is happening with Sloane and others, and it really does a bad job at interpreting the Empire. There's no way getting around it. I like to keep a positive aspect on these books, but I didn't like these books so much. I do enjoy the interludes a lot, even if they basically stop the story in its place. And I did enjoy reading about Ray Sloane, and even the sloppy writing I enjoyed sometimes, though it did get grating at some points. This book, while it sort of been teased to be the sort of the liberation of Kashyyyk, though it does happen, Han Solo goes and rescues Chewbacca and his Wookiee friends. It's mostly about sort of like the aftermath of Aftermath. And Empire's End, from what I can tell, is a story about the Battle of Jakku, before, during, and after. And what I enjoy most about the Aftermath Trilogy is it ended the Galactic Civil War quickly. I know it went on for 14 years in Legends, which, about 14 years at least, and I thought that was totally ridiculous, especially since they were celebrating so much in the end of Return of the Jedi. You would think you ended the war was